Thank you so much for joining us today, Michelle.
Thank you for having me.
So what is it like to be editor-in-chief at Allure magazine?
Ooh, what a question. So I always think of it as, so I've been working in media for the past 25 years, and when I first started out, the role of the editor-in-chief was completely different. So my first role here in New York was actually at Glamour, and so at the time it was Glamour magazine. The editor-in-chief was this totally legendary editor named Ruth Whitney. And so she had that one role, though, which was to be the editor-in-chief of a magazine. I think today, being an editor-in-chief is almost being the shepherd of a brand. So I've been there now for about 3.5 years. And when I started, I was very much seen as this new realm of editor-in-chief who was sort of like the modern editor who understood print and digital and video and social and all those different things. So one of my biggest things to do was to have everybody understand that we're not just a magazine anymore. Mm-hmm. So I remember when I first started, people would still introduce themselves and say, I'm so-and-so, I'm an editor at Allure magazine. So we very much, like that first week, we're like, you're not an editor at Allure magazine, you're an editor at Allure. And it was shifting the viewpoint of everyone internally, but also externally, to have them understand we're not just a magazine, we're now a media brand. So flash forward 3.5 years, and I actually see it much differently now, where we're not just a media brand, where we're also a brand. Mm-hmm. So we were talking before we came up here about one of our businesses is the Allure Beauty Box. So we now are in consumer products, we're doing events, we're doing all those other media things as well. But I think that what's been really innovative in the past 3.5 years that I've been there has been us shifting from being just media into being an overall brand. Well, so yes, but to answer your question also about what is it like to be the editor-in-chief, on social media, if anyone follows me, we play with a lot of beauty products. Like, it's definitely a very, very fun job. I have a couple of my coworkers here who, it's probably one of the only offices that you can walk into, and it's completely normal to walk by someone and they're putting on a full face of makeup. We actually are testing for our Allure Best of Beauty Awards right now, and so every season we test 10,000 products just for that. So it sounds so fun, and it is very fun, but it's also incredibly overwhelming because we go home every single day with just bags and bags of stuff. So that's the fun part of it. Like, I think playing with beauty products, getting to understand everything about the beauty industry. But I think being an editor-in-chief also is a lot of work. I think a lot of times people in media and in movies and stuff have this picture of what an editor-in-chief does. For example, The Devil Wears Prada, right? I think that we all have this image of what the Miranda Priestly character does. I always describe being an editor-in-chief, though, sort of like being the director of a movie. For some of my family members, for example, who don't really understand what an editor is, I often got the question, like, what does an editor do? Are you fixing the commas and the periods all the time? I'm like, that's a part of it. But really, it's being the director of a movie, where I am the key decision maker in all the different creative choices. So if we also wanted to get into some new business, if we wanted to launch a line of brushes or makeup bags or anything else, I would be involved in the entire creative process of it too. So I think that my role now, honestly, it touches a lot more on the business side than I ever could have imagined 20 years ago.
Thank you. Well, this next question comes more from a personal spot for me. The publishing industry in general is overwhelmingly white. And we're talking about novels, magazines, et cetera. And growing up as a young girl, I rarely saw models looking like myself when I was
Where did you grow up?
In Canada, in Vancouver.
Oh.
So when I was there, I never saw a lot of cover models who looked like me or who were different on covers. And so this year alone, in 2019, Serena Williams was your January cover. Then you had Crazy Rich Asian star Jemma Chan in another cover. So how do you approach, diversity at the organization? And then how do you also make that trickle down beyond just, editor-in-chief?
Yeah, well, I think it's a couple different things. Part of it is internally, how we look at our staff, how we look at hiring. And I actually do think that that's very much related to the type of content then that we produce also. So in the 3.5 years that I've been at Allure, so right before I started, I created a presentation for my bosses to say, this is what I would want to do with the brand. And obviously, you start out having a plan and things evolve over time. I think if I looked back at that presentation now, a lot of things would have changed from it. But one of the things that was core to that mission, even back then, was diversity. So it's crazy actually to think about that 3.5 years ago, there was like hardly any diversity when it came to magazine covers, when it came to models on runways, and actually we've come so far since then. But I think, back 3 years ago, it was still considered to be kind of a quote unquote risk to put a person of color on the cover. I'd have to look back at the numbers, but I would guess that on average, if you looked at the normal magazine cover, it was maybe average to have about 2 people of color on a cover in a year. Last year alone, I think more than half of our covers were people of color. But it's also not just doing diversity for diversity's sake. I think that now we've moved on to this space of looking at what it means as a story, but also making sure that diversity is just woven into everything that we do and that it doesn't feel heavy-handed. I think that the thing that we never want to happen is have someone feel like it's exploitative or that we're just doing it to get like the pat on the back. And also thinking about what is diversity, right? I think that as an Asian American woman, I think of diversity first and foremost from a gender perspective, but also from race and ethnicity. But when it comes to beauty, I think there are still a lot of underserved communities that deal with, body type, ageism. We, in 2017, famously banned the term anti-aging from Allure forever, and it actually became just this global phenomenon where people around the world were talking about it. I actually read something that in the UK, someone had put forward a referendum to ban anti-aging from the UK because they read our story. So I feel like there is something through diversity and inclusion that we can do that's really important and kind of beyond just making people feel good about themselves. I think that I have 2 kids. So for my son and also my daughter, I think it's really cool, the fact that they can watch movies, that they can look at magazine covers, that they can look at photos of people who look like them. And it's not necessarily that this image of beauty that's portrayed by the media or pop culture or anything else is just this one super narrow view. So yeah, I think diversity, it's been very, very important to me. We last year also, you mentioned the Jemma Chan cover, last year for June, we had our hair issue. So we were trying to think about who we would have on the cover. So it's always this big discussion. We usually have like boards up and stuff about looking at different celebrities and models of who's having a moment right now. So we decided to choose 3 Asian models, and it still was this beautiful hair moment. We had one with bright pink hair, we had one with black hair, and one with platinum hair. But putting 3 Asian models on the cover, it was sort of this statement without being like to beat people over the head of it, about tokenism. Because normally if you look at an advertisement or a magazine cover where they talk about it being diverse, there's usually, let's say, 5 white models and then 1 person of color. So for us, we were like, we're gonna give these 3 Asian models their own cover. It went crazy out in the world of social media. Chrissy Teigen tweeted about it and stuff. And so I wrote my editor's letter about, after we decided to do that, I actually started looking into how many Asian women had been on the cover of Allure in the past 28 years. So in the past 28 years, and I want to say it was like 327 covers, there had only been 2 Asian women. The first was Lucy Liu over 10 years ago, and then Olivia Munn. So in this one issue of Allure, where we had the 3 Asian women on the cover, we actually had more Asian representation than in the entire 28-year history. So that's just Allure. And I think for the entire industry, it's important for all of us when we can to be showing that these things can be successful and showing that just what it looks like. Because I think that the people who are at the helm of some of the other brands, they don't know what it is until they actually see it. And the thing that I find kind of alarming, I talk a lot about diversity in a lot of panels and stuff, and I think that there's a lot of people who think that we're good, that we're like, oh, the beauty and fashion industry is so diverse now, and I'm like, we are so not there. I think that people very much still see it as like, they've got like a light-skinned black girl, and then they go, ding, we can click that off, and I just feel like there's so much more to do and so much more to start the conversation.
Thank you for providing a voice to a lot of communities that haven't seen representation. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Beyond just disrupting covers and narratives that you tell in Allure, I'm curious to know, from your POV, what are some areas that are ripe for disruption in the beauty industry today?
Oh, so many. How many of you work in the beauty industry right now? Because I feel like there were some of you who had beauty clients, right? Okay. So beauty is so exciting right now. I mean, I don't have to tell you guys who work in it. I do think, though, in the world of sustainability, I actually think that there's a lot of interesting conversation happening right now. And partly because if you think about beauty and personal care how much waste there is, not only just on like the consumer portion of things. Like we talk about this all the time because us testing 10,000 products in like a 3-month period for Best of Beauty, imagine how much just like packaging waste we get. And it tends to be that the more expensive brands, let's say in skincare, we always equate it to like a Russian doll, where it's like you get like this little tiny cream, but it's inside 10 boxes that you have to kind of like open up like this. There's a lot of waste within that process, but then also within manufacturing. So I actually think, and I've started to see some movement in this too, of some startups and stuff who are doing things packaging free. I think Lush does some really interesting things also in terms of like bath bombs. If you think about them, there's no packaging waste whatsoever. So I think that some of the new things that I've just been seeing hitting my desk have been more related to the actual delivery of things, as opposed to even, there's still innovation happening with skincare ingredients and with new makeup colors and everything, but in a way that's almost like side stuff right now. And the really cool things are actually happening in the distribution of products, in personalization, and also in how to create these things in a more sustainable way.
Is there a favorite brand that you see doing this that our audience should be aware of?
Like I said, I think Lush is really interesting. There was this brand, which I'm going to butcher the name of the brand, so I'm not even going to say it, but this founder, and it's not a big company whatsoever yet, but she came to visit me, and it was that her thought process was so smart because she basically had, it was like a little bamboo round box that just swivels, and she called them, I think it was like bath stones. No, I'm sorry, body stones. So basically this woman who was the founder, she started out in finance, but then she went to pastry school. So she learned how to make chocolates and everything. So using the same methods of how she would make chocolates, she decided that she wanted to make body care products. So rather than having, if you think about like the lotion bottles that you have at home, right? What do? You hopefully recycle them, but then you just toss them, and it's like a lot of waste. For her, she was like, if I create these body stones, it's basically just you rub it onto your body, and then the heat from your skin melts it, and it's basically zero waste whatsoever. I don't know how big her company is going to be, but I thought that the thought process behind it was really innovative, and I think that the more people who are doing those types of things, the larger companies are also going to follow suit.
I like this. Environmental, sustainable, probably where the direction of the world needs to go. So I'm kind of curious, because we live here in New York, it's definitely a mecca for all sorts of beauty treatments and beauty innovation. What are some must-tries in New York City?
Oh my gosh, I've tried so many. I thought about this a lot because I think as part of my job, a very fun part of my job, we get to try a lot of different treatments. So I recently, which we were just talking about before, had brow microblading. I don't know if you guys all know what that is, but it's basically little tattoos that look like hairs, so you don't have to do your brows anymore every day. Fascinating, highly, highly recommend it. The other thing too is that I think that for a long time, people either believed in facials or they didn't believe in facials. I think that I knew a lot of people who thought, well, facials are just kind of BS. Like they basically just put a lot of products on your face, and like you could do that at home and not pay $300. Today, though, I think the modern facials are really cool because they mix technology also with products. There are a couple of really great facials in the city. I love Joanna Vargas. There's Dr. David Colbert, who he recently, I want to say within the past couple of years, launched a whole secondary practice. So his first practice was the New York Dermatological Center, and then now he has a whole other floor of this building that's all surrounding technology and skincare and just general beauty. So he has things like red light LED beds, like very, very cool stuff. And then the other thing I would highly recommend too for anyone who's very into skincare is microneedling. Do you guys all know what that is? Okay, so microneedling you probably see on Instagram and stuff of, there's at-home tools where it looks sort of like a little roller, and those are fine. But I think if you go to get professional microneedling, I highly, highly believe in it, where again, it's sort of this merger of technology and skincare and everything else, where the thought process behind it is basically, if you've ever had a laser treatment, it's similar, that if you get a little cut in your skin, our skin is miraculous because it can heal itself. So it's sort of a similar situation of where it's creating these little micro injuries in your skin that then heal themselves, and then they're producing more collagen. That one I truly, truly believe in. You may have seen like some of the scary photos online of the vampire facial. That's a part of microneedling where they do something called PRP, which is like platelet-rich plasma, and they basically spin your blood in a centrifuge, and then after they do microneedling, they put that all over your face. It looks crazy, but it really does work.
Well, I got to chat with Michelle prior to this and saw her very up close, and her skin looks great. So maybe I'll have to take some of your recommendations and go for this. So, at Google, I've had the pleasure of working with a lot of different type of people. And one person who's very dear to me, who sits next to me, is a drag queen on the weekends and sometimes on nights. So I'm really curious about this question here. Beauty historically has primarily been focused on women. But when I've covered the beauty industry within Google, the big trend I see is year over year, we see men's grooming skyrocketing exponentially. And mainstream culture has also increasingly embraced male-identified makeup influencers in shows like RuPaul's Drag Race. So how do you see this impacting change over time? And what do you expect in this space in the coming years?
Yeah, I think for sure in the past year and a half, I would say the whole, it sounds weird to even call it a trend, but the whole movement of genderless beauty has really taken off. I tend to think that in the next couple of years, especially among like the younger generation, they're not going to see gender anymore when it comes to beauty. I mean, my daughter is 10, and all of her friends went crazy for there was like the James Charles palette over the holidays. They all wanted this James Charles palette. I think that genderless beauty is a really important trend. There's been a lot of discussion about male grooming in the past 5 years, though. I think that when I've talked to companies, they haven't really seen like a huge, there's always been this feeling of men's grooming is going to really take off, really going to take off. And I think that if we looked at it on a chart, I'm sure that it has kind of gone up. I don't know that there's going to be like a huge boom in it, though, that we're feeling yet. I actually think that there's still a huge, just looking at America, there's still this huge, huge group of people who don't do any type of beauty whatsoever. I think Olay had done some study a couple years ago that found that the vast majority of people don't even wash their faces. So even to capture 1% of those people who don't wash their faces, like that's still a huge number. So I think that if I were a beauty brand, I would definitely be looking at like some of the low-hanging fruit of like, can we just get people to wash their faces? But yeah, I think that in general, like drag makeup, frankly, has been probably the biggest catalyst for pushing makeup in general. Because if you look at if you look at most big beauty influencers right now, everyone is kind of doing a form of drag makeup. Contouring, like really like amazing blending of like eyeshadows. A lot of that really originates from the drag community. So I think that, frankly, there's a lot of people who don't realize that, but I do think that a lot of people do realize that there is that emphasis of it, and also just appreciate the artistry.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So Allure has also been able to expand the brand with efforts like the Best of Beauty seal that you see in a lot of stores, as well as the Allure Beauty subscription box. So why do you think these have been so successful for the company? And how important is it for brands that have had more traditional approaches to innovate, to grow?
Yeah. Well, I think this one goes back to what I was saying before about getting people to understand that we're not just a media brand, and we truly are a brand. I completely nerd out when it comes to business and technology. Like, I love talking about those things. So the fact that as an editor-in-chief, I can actually work on consumer products is really exciting to me. I think it's important for us, and the reason it's been successful has been we do have these 28 years of trust that Allure has built up. I think everything that we do when it comes to consumer products and events and other things is kind of still built on this overall trust and authority of us being that brand that if it's anything related to beauty, you should trust our word on it. Like, we want to be the first and last word on any beauty trend, on what the best products are. And if you think about like the Allure Beauty Box, so it's a monthly subscription that you get. And so what makes ours different from some of the other ones on the market is that it's all editor curated. So it's sort of like getting a box from me where we would write little reviews about here's what you should like about this product, here's how you can use it, this worked for this skin tone, not for this skin tone. We actually had an editor from Allure Korea visit recently, and she brought me 2 boxes like about this big, like really big, filled with Korean beauty products that you can't buy here. And she very nicely wrote like little handwritten Post-it notes on every single one of them. And it's hard to get me excited about things now because we see so many products, but I was so excited to get these products because it was hand curated by her, where she was like, these are the products that I know that Michelle is gonna get excited about and that she's gonna love. So I think that in the ideal case is really what the Allure Beauty Box should be, that for you at home, if you're a fan of Allure on any of the other platforms, or maybe not, you feel like you're getting something that is straight from the editors that we've picked for you.
Amazing. So this question, our audience today, no surprise, skews heavily towards women. So I'd like to ask this question on their behalf, right? You have a very powerful position at determining the voice of Allure and what gets disseminated to your readers, right? So for a lot of the women in this room who do envision themselves in a leadership position one day, what are the habits and behaviors that you adopted over the years that help propel you to where you are today?
Yeah. Out of curiosity, as a show of hands, how many of you manage people? Okay, so a bunch of you. I think for me, the biggest lesson that I had to learn was about management. And I'm not sure how things are at Google. Do you guys have like management training here?
Yes.
You do,
I
okay.
think when you get promoted to a certain level, you
got it. So typically in media, there's no such, well, I mean, there's some, I guess, management training, but it's not necessarily something that people have to go through or always go through. So the weird thing about when you start to climb the ladder within media, often, you start as an assistant. There used to be sort of like this path, you'd become an assistant editor, an associate editor, a senior editor, da-da-da. The further you go up, suddenly you're managing people. And then it becomes this weird thing, and especially if you're a young manager. For me, it was a hard transition of where you go from being people's friend and colleague to suddenly you're managing people. And I think the hardest thing for me, and as I've talked to other women who are managers too, one of the hardest things is this distinction between being liked and being respected, and not confusing those two, because they are different. And I think that for a long time in the earlier part of my career, I only cared about being liked. And it would hurt my feelings if I felt like I wasn't liked. The difference now, I think, is that along the way, and my husband's actually here, and he was the one who sort of like drove this home with me, it's more important to be respected. And if you have the respect of your team, they're also gonna like you too. So I think that what happens a lot sometimes with women, I think in particular, is that you can get kind of frozen in decision making if you try and make everyone happy. So if you're trying to make everyone happy, you're gonna make no one happy. I've very much learned, so Anna Wintour is my boss, and I've very much learned a lot from her in terms of like decision making. People always talk about she is the most efficient woman in the world. I don't know how she does all of her meetings every day, but I have definitely noticed that if there's a meeting with her and it's set for half an hour, it's done in about 10 minutes. So I've started to do that also, and understanding just how much more efficient I can be with my time, how much more efficient I can be with decision making, not sitting on decisions all the time and being like, what do you think? What do you think? Like, obviously I want to hear people's opinions, but I think there comes a time where you just have to kind of, pull the trigger and do something. So yeah, I think learning management has been a really big thing for me. What was the rest of your question? I feel like I had another point about that.
The rest of my question was related to around other strategies or habits that you might have had, or any books or trainings that you might have attended that could be shareable with the audience.
Yeah, I think the big thing for me was understanding that being a good manager and leadership is all about being different too. I don't know if it's something about being Asian American also maybe, but I think that I've definitely thought about this a lot, that when I was younger, I just wanted to assimilate. So I grew up in a very not diverse town, and so my whole MO back then was be like everyone else. I just want to fit in and be like everyone else. And weirdly, in the beginning of my career, I think that I kind of took that same approach, where I was like, I would work in a job and I was like, I just want to be like everyone else and fit in. So any of my ideas that I had, I don't want to do anything that was too weird because I just want to fit in. When actually, probably like at the halfway point of my career, I realized that I was doing things completely wrong. And here at Google, I think you guys have a completely different approach on things, where it is about standing out and having ideas. in certain worlds of media, especially in like fashion media, it was not that way whatsoever. But the advice that I give to people now is stand out, be weird, have kind of weird ideas. It truly is that thing that I don't think, like 10 years ago, because I was so sort of stuck in this mindset of just fitting in, I don't think that I would have gotten to where I am now if I didn't start to take big risks, take big chances. And some of that, comes with being a leader and being given the opportunity to do that. I'm lucky in that, like, my bosses have given me that opportunity and the runway to be like, it's okay, go ahead. They haven't said make mistakes, but they've said take big risks. And I took that as make mistakes sometimes. But I think it's important to stand out. Like, I always talk about people in our office who I call them the quiet warriors, and that used to be me, where I had this feeling that if you just put your head down and like work, you're there 12 hours a day and you're gonna prove to your boss that you are the hardest worker there. In some cases that works, but I will say, like, the people who are better about promoting themselves, they're good at presenting in meetings, they have some of those softer skills too. It is so important. And I think because of like looking at my kids now, I think nowadays they teach kids like better presenting skills, how to do things like that more, to think outside the box. But it very much was something that I had to learn a lot.
Amazing. So I would love to know, what is it like to work for Anna Wintour?
It's amazing. Like I said, I have learned so much from her. So do you guys all know Jemma Chan? Okay, so Eva, my very first day when I came to work at Allure, and this is actually my 4th time working at Condé Nast, but becoming an editor-in-chief at Allure is like a big deal. So I live in New Jersey, and I was driving into work my first day. So Eva was like, call me, because I'll give you advice about how to do things. So she was the one who first said to me, like, you're not gonna have a lot of small talk with Anna, but it's not because she doesn't want to, it's that she is so busy. And she is the most efficient woman in the world. So in emails, everything else, just get to the point. So again, like, sometimes I'm someone who, I will write a lot in an email, but with her, I just know to keep it short and sweet. And I think that because of those things and understanding that in a meeting, you have to just get your point out right away, I actually feel like I've learned so much from that. And I've learned a lot from like watching her personality and my personality are not necessarily exactly the same. And I don't think that that's necessarily like what she's looking for either. But I have learned so much just about dealing with people, management, and getting straight to the point.
Amazing. So as a very public face of Allure, what are 3 values that you abide by or causes that you work on outside of Allure?
Oh, causes. Well, I guess to answer your first question, I guess like qualities, I feel like there is a feeling of respect that, especially working at a brand that's within the fashion and beauty space, I think that the stereotype, I guess, of working in fashion was that it was very bitchy and like people are mean and backbiting and stuff. And yes, that it does exist in certain places. I think for me though, I have always spent my entire career with this kind of dumb belief sometimes, I guess, of where people should be happy at work. And like, I'm just such a huge believer in it, where people have given me advice before about like, you need to go like Machiavellian on this person and do this, da-da. I'm just a huge believer that like, if I just go like that, I do things with respect and like trust people, everything tends to kind of work out fine. I think in terms of like causes that I'm really interested in, so last week, I was at a gala for Apex for Youth. Have you ever heard of this?
Yes.
So Apex for Youth is actually this great Asian American organization here in the city. And I have learned so much from them because I actually had no idea until getting involved with them that Asian Americans actually have the highest poverty rate here in the city. There are like crazy statistics about how I think Asian Americans make up 13% of the population here in the city, but only get about 1% of the resources. There are a ton of kids who, I don't remember the exact stats, but it's like a lot of them are the only one who speaks English in their household. Like a lot of them drop out of school. So I feel like in the past 3 years, I've definitely gotten involved in that quite a bit. And like I said, diversity efforts in general. I think because of everything that we've done at Allure in terms of really promoting diversity, it is absolutely the topic that I go out and talk about the most. And also the thing I find really interesting is the more sort of internal part of it too. Like I've met with a lot of diversity and inclusion directors for other companies that we normally don't work with, like other like consumer electronics and stuff like that. And I'm always fascinated to hear about what people are doing. I met with someone from, I want to say it was like Samsung and another company also, and they were talking about how they've stopped using the terms diversity and inclusion, and now internally they just say belonging. And they explained to me about how belonging is different, and I don't know, I'm just finding it really fascinating watching what's happening to the world in this super short span of time.
So if you weren't editor-in-chief of Allure, what else would be your dream job?
Well, I used to always say, when I was way too old to say this, when people would say, what do you want to be when you grow up? I always said a baker. I don't know. I think when I was a little kid, I really just enjoyed the fantasy of being a baker, and I thought I'd just wear the hat and like have fun all the time. I was this weird kid who, up until I was a sophomore in college, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. People ask me all the time, like, did you know when you were a little kid that you wanted to be an editor-in-chief? Not at all. I think once I chose journalism, everything ended up falling into place, and then you look back in your life and everything sort of made sense. I think that as I was mentioning to you before, I'm obsessed with food. So I would either want to, I don't think I would actually want to cook or bake though. My dream job is really to have like a travel show where I just go around and travel and eat.
Is there a favorite restaurant in New York or in the world?
Okay, so in the world, my whole family went to Europe, and we stayed for like a couple weeks last year, and we went to Frenchy in Paris, and it was one of those things where it was just an amazing experience. And like I love traveling and eating. I also spent 2 weeks in Japan this past summer, and it's hard to even say like what my favorite restaurant was there. I think it's more of the experience of going, and some of my favorite meals, this sounds so crazy, but we're actually just like, just stops and having like a little like rice bowl or something. A lot of times I feel like it's just the overall experience of it.
Amazing. Well, actually, at this time, thank you, Michelle. We're going to open the floor for any questions that folks may have for Michelle. So we do have 2 mics on the right and left, and feel free to ask a question if you have any.
Hi.
So my question is, you mentioned that one of your objectives was to turn Allure from being a magazine into a brand. So I was wondering, for the content that is traditionally delivered through the magazine, like the articles and the interviews, like whether that will the idea is for it to continue to go through that, or if like some of that will be moved on to other platforms, and like what the role of the magazine will be in the future.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that for us, the magazine is still a really important part of who we are. The great thing about, you guys all know, like the media world right now, it's like this, right? You hear about every week practically there's some new like website going under or being sold, or like a magazine is going out of print. I think for us though, what's great is that we're part of the beauty world. And the beauty world is one of the only growing sectors right now, especially within retail, which I know you work in too. Like, beauty has really been the one that's just sort of like bucking all the trends. Whereas like other brick and mortar stores are going out of business, the Sephoras and Ultas and Credo Beauties and everything, like they're all taking off like crazy. It's sort of the same thing with us for print too. I think that print, there is such an interest in beauty right now that we're very lucky in that it's really been like kind of growing and stable. In terms of like platforms though, I actually think that they're such different beasts. I always talk about that with digital media, it's very much a sort of like lean forward experience where you're reading kind of quicker articles, you're watching videos and other things. Still to me, the print experience is very lean back. It's very much like you always see people on airplanes and like at the beach and everything. It's that time that you get to just sort of like lean back, and it's such a different experience. So I think that when we think about creating content in that way too, we think about the magazine as that place where we can do some more long reads, there's more investigative journalism, there's more reporting there's more just beautiful big photography. And the other thing that I think is still very important on so many different levels is the cover. So I always say to people that a magazine cover still matters. And you probably have all seen that a lot of digital native brands are starting to do now digital covers, because there's something about when you pop that logo on a photo, it just means something. I think it's like the original form of curation that it's saying this is the person, this is the story that you should really pay attention to. So in terms of like celebrities, everyone else, like that cover still really matters. When we put Helen Mirren on our cover, when we banned the term anti-aging, we could have done that as a smaller story online, but the fact that we made it a cover story and shot her for the cover had so much more impact than that. So I definitely think the magazine's really important.
Thanks.
I've noticed this happening a lot recently where a lot of women in their 20s and 30s are starting to think about Botox. And I'm just curious your thoughts on that, the health risks, and again, just kind of going back to that term anti-aging and what kind of that means with Botox coming into play so early on.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because after we banned anti-aging, I think some people took it as, does that mean that you guys are going to stop talking about Botox? You're going to stop doing things on skincare? I think for us, that was totally not our intention. Like for us, we are very much, whatever you want to do that makes you happy is awesome. I think that for people in their 20s and 30s who want to try Botox, I think why not, right? Like I think that anything that makes you happy, as long as it's something that's actually driven by you and not by society saying, this is what we think you need to do, because, you're getting some little fine lines and wrinkles under there. I think that there is, I would say in your 20s and 30s, though, there's other skincare that can probably do similar things at this point. Like I said, microneedling is one of them. I definitely have talked to other people who, because they don't want to like do, 4 times of like Botox a year, they're kind of willing to try other things first. That would be my suggestion, is that a lot of it, frankly, in terms of like early aging, is sun damage. I know there's been a lot of like talk about like the danger of sunscreen now, but even just honestly wearing a hat, or like when you go to the beach, going under shade sometimes, the big, like seriously, like anyone who's seen those, the images of like sun damage on skin, it is a real thing. When you go to Asia, like every woman is wearing like a big hat, she's got an umbrella on a sunny day. Like we need to start taking more care, maybe not that far, but.
Thank you. When I think of Allure, I always think industry leader and like authentic. And whether it's in terms of your diverse digital covers or the Best of Beauty seal that you provide. One problem that I perceive in the social media beauty industry right now is these influencer-led direct-to-consumer brands, where a lot of the content that I'm seeing today are ads by DTC beauty companies, where someone or the other has written a really glorious, authentic review of the brand, and that in itself is the ad, right? There is no other professionally shot poster or anything. I find that quite misleading and also potentially really dangerous. So as an industry leader, do you feel like Allure has a responsibility or a role to play to rectify the situation here?
I think that it would probably take more than us to rectify the situation, because you mentioned diet products in particular, right?
Diet and in general, all sorts of corrective measures in the beauty space.
Yeah.
Whether it's teeth whitening, teeth straightening, pores, so on and so forth.
Yeah, I do think that we have the authority to do that. I think that, again, like the whole anti-aging thing really changed my viewpoint on how we look at what our role is. That actually, as the industry leader, by us saying, like in my editor's letter of that issue, I did a call to the entire industry saying, we call on you guys to join us in this change. And I've thought about, this is sort of off the record, but I've thought about doing something similar with sustainability too. That if us as the leader, like I don't think that, a beauty brand could say, hey, beauty industry, we want you guys to join us. It's different coming from them. I think coming from Allure to say, we're gonna take this huge step, we want you to join us, I think it does mean something. And similarly with diet products and also just sort of like the ads and everything, I think it's a huge problem. I am hopeful that consumers can kind of see through those things, but I do wonder like what it's doing. And I, again, like thinking about my son is 14. So I think for 14-year-olds in particular, especially like with girls, there's so much that's targeted to them that they don't fully understand yet what's like sponsored and what's not sponsored. In terms of what we could do about it, I don't think that it's something that I've necessarily thought about before, but do you know Jamila Jamil? So she's been like so outspoken as one person saying, you guys, stop doing this. So when I do look at someone like her, and we featured her as part of that too, like I feel like she is someone who's shown that even as just like one person, you can have an impact on that. So I don't know how to answer it necessarily because I don't think that we're doing anything specifically related to that. I do think it's an issue, and at least on our own platforms, like one of the big questions that I always got when I first started was, how do you plan to compete with influencers, right? Because when people think about the beauty world, they do think about influencers now. There's a lot of brands who are paying them a lot of money. A lot of them have very big audiences. I think that we're such a different animal, and I think that we can actually coexist. The big thing with us, though, in which I think some of the bigger influencers also are starting to adopt some of these methods, is don't accept money for something that you don't believe in. I think that for some of the smaller influencers, or the ones who are just focused on getting money, probably, they maybe don't understand that. But I always say to our team, like, there's no brand who can pay me to say that a product is the best. There's no brand that can pay me to say I like a product, that I use a product all the time. We definitely do branded and sponsored posts, but I think there's a way to do things that you still maintain your credibility.
Just to follow up to that, have you thought of like having a certification for influencers in place? Sort of saying that these are the guidelines that influencers should follow to be authentic. And here's a list of influencers that Allure is working with who meet these guidelines for brands, small and large, to really follow. And for consumers to also know that if it's coming from an Allure certified influencer, I am likely to hear.
That's actually a really great idea. We've thought about similar things of right now our Best of Beauty Awards are really just for products. So we have thought before about, do we at some point expand those awards to include people, other things? That's a great idea though.
I'd love to hear more about your thoughts on how Allure is a brand with 20 plus years of reputation as beauty experts can coexist with this influx of beauty influencers and people on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and social media who, in their own way, people have been coming to them perhaps because of a history of a lack of diversity in print and in media. And YouTube, anyone can be an influencer, and you can find someone who really matches you or works for, your look, your color, etc. And so, I'd love to hear more about how you think about coexisting in that space and not thinking about that as kind of cannibalizing.
Yep. I think it's two things. One, I see what our biggest differentiating factor is expertise. So it's not only that we're this collective of editors who literally see every single product, we go to every show, we see every trend before products even come out. So we have this built-in expertise among our staff. But then we also have the expertise of all the experts who we talk to. So dermatologists, plastic surgeons, cosmetic chemists, medical doctors, whoever else. And we're talking to the best of the best in the world. I think with influencers, with most of them, it comes from a place of personal experience. And there's nothing wrong with that. I definitely want, when I'm looking at a product to buy or something else, I want to hear the person's personal experience. But I think there's also something really valuable with having the science behind things, the broader scope of things, understanding that actually that ingredient doesn't mix well with that one, and you shouldn't use that. So I think that where we have kind of like carved out a really great niche for ourselves has been that feeling of expertise and authority. But then the other thing was, too, when I started at Allure, I always say, I really didn't know a lot of the editors. I think now with social media and everything, I follow a lot of editors. I feel like the dictate at Allure was very much, we write from the royal we, right? You're writing as Allure the brand. You're not Allure, you're not Jenny Bailly, who's our executive beauty director. You're not writing from Jenny's voice, you're writing from the Allure voice. I very much wanted to tear down those walls because I do think that beauty is personal. That, as you were saying before about diversity, because of YouTube and social media and everything else, you do kind of want to connect to somebody and understand, okay, this person has hair like mine, this person has dry skin like mine. So I very much wanted to make sure that people understood who is behind the brand too. So in the Allure Beauty Box, for example, we actually just started doing this where the reviews in our little mini magazine that we put in each box used to be written in the royal we, where it would just be sort of the Allure voice. But we've actually now started putting little editor photos with each of them, and it's written from that first person. So you understand that if Gabby did a review, Gabby is talking about it from her own personal experience as an editor and as an expert, but also you can understand, oh, okay, great, she's just like me. I understand that this is her personal experience. So I feel like it's such a different thing. And we do work with some influencers too. I think for a long time, there were editors who kind of didn't really like influencers. They thought oh, who are these people sitting front row at Fashion Week and blah, blah, blah. I actually have a totally different belief. I think that there are great ones out there who we can work with. We've done really great partnerships with people before, and it can be sort of this like mutually beneficial thing.
Thank you for talking about the new brands coming into the cosmetic space for gender inclusivity. I guess my question is, as an editor, when you're thinking about an article on those types of brands or items to put in an Allure box, what do you think makes one brand better than another, other than like an authentic brand message around inclusion? Just like, what's the difference between formulation and colors for?
It's a lot. I will tell you, because I'm heavily in testing right now for Best of Beauty awards. I am shocked sometimes by how many bad products there are. Like, I think that as we're testing these like thousands and thousands of products, it actually makes me really sad that people spend money on products that are just not good. So I think instantly we're able to really determine quickly like what's bad, right? But then let's say if you're left with like 20 eyeliners or something that you're like, okay, these are really good, it's a lot of testing. If it's skincare, we go to a lot of experts and we talk about, it's not necessarily the ingredients, but it's also looking at the amounts of ingredients, because sometimes people think like, oh, if it's 100% hyaluronic acid, it must be better. Actually, that's not true. Like, if you talk to a chemist and they're like, actually, the optimal percentage is going to be this. We get very, very nerdy about some of these ingredient things. So I think it's a lot of research with those things. And also, like, the biggest thing is, I think you mentioned the word authenticity. Fenty Beauty obviously had a big couple of years where they really did disrupt the beauty industry. When they came out of the gate and they had those 40 shades of foundation, it was a huge statement. There were other brands at the time, though, who said, well, that's nothing new. We started out and we had a diverse shade range also. But I think what was different about Fenty was that the diversity message wasn't just, here's 40 colors on our Instagram. The diversity and inclusion message was woven through every single thing that they did. So every single photo, every video, everything that they do, it's all interwoven in that. And I think that nowadays the consumer is kind of savvy, and they understand that, like, for those 6 to 8 months after Fenty came out, there were a ton of other brands who were like, we now have 40 shades, we now have 40 shades. And that's great, and I think it's been an amazing movement. But I do think that the consumer can kind of tell when there's like a true authenticity behind things. And brands have to be able to follow through on it too. Because I think one of the big complaints has been, even though a brand will say they have 40 shades, if you then go to the store, they actually don't stock the darker shades. So it does come in, people talk, right? Like, influencers talk, reviews talk. People will understand pretty quickly if you are not really the real deal.
I've worked here as a product marketer and a brand marketer, and my line of work has me thinking a lot about the relationship between dark skin and technology these days. From a machine learning perspective, from a camera vision perspective, we've seen that manufacturers in different parts of the world will sometimes express or build in cultural preference into the way the technology works. So in India, you see skin lightening. In China, you see skin whitening. How do you deal with the relationship between trend and cultural preference and morality, I guess, and kind of what is a good standard?
My take on it is that I think that for people in a position of authority, of mine, let's say, in media, I think that morality is key. I think that sometimes, for example, we've done covers in the past where I think because diversity has been such an important thing to me and to the brand, which if you looked at the newsstand sales of that issue, it wasn't a big winner. At the same time, I kind of don't care, right? I actually think that as a larger mission, magazine sales used to always be like, what are your newsstand sales? And that drove what was the success or the failure of anything. I think that I look at it now as success is overall what we're doing, how we're growing, but also what we're doing with society and how we're changing things. When I look back at how I actually really do think that we've pushed the needle in a lot of ways, I think just even from my own personal experience, I think that the morality part of it is always going to be key.
Can I ask a quick follow-up? So if your back is against the wall and you have to justify a decision like that, how does that conversation go?
I'm very lucky, like I said, in that my boss's diversity for them is such a core mission too. I have never had a problem with pushing forward anything. So I'm actually on the diversity council of our company as well. And I think that, unfortunately, I do know it's not like that at every company. I think I just personally am sort of lucky that I have that. I think that it is kind of understanding who your allies are too. That luckily at my own company, most of the executives are actually on the diversity council too. So even if it's like a key moment, you know, that like they have to make a decision, whatever, like I think that they now have trust in certain people and they understand like the broader goals and like how this is really good for us as a whole, as an industry, but also as society to do these things. I think a lot of times, so it is hard because I know other people who don't work in that environment. It is finding your allies and kind of going as like a group of people too.
Thanks.
I deliver mental health services here at Google. So I'm wondering, which is very, very unusual for my career. So I'm wondering in the space of beauty that's women heavy, what kind of services are offered as a benefit to your staff you've got major challenges to both deliver services and deliver confidence and beauty as people are. So what are you doing about that?
I want mental health services. I don't know. Our services are not necessarily mental health, but for our staff, we have a lot of beauty services, frankly. We've got like a brow person who comes in. Well, it's more sort of
external, and that, you know, that, I mean, not that it's not bad, good, but that there's also a need for women to be internally happy, and folks who come from different backgrounds, folks of color, often have some internal unbeautiful feelings.
Yeah.
And so I just wonder, that's what I do. So I always wonder about the internal beauty. And when we look at things in women, like, you know, I can see the beauty that comes from external, both bath gel, brows, makeup, but when they sit before me, they're cutting, they're not eating, they're drinking too much, and they can be very successful in any place in their life, but they're really damaging themselves or damaging families by lack of emotional intelligence. And then they're not a great team member when they're before you because they're doing all this other stuff. They've got great brows and that's good. But there's some, so I'm just wondering, is there?
Yeah. So at our larger company, actually, this is a somewhat newer thing this past year. So we've actually launched a bunch of groups. One has been a Latinx group. One is a women's network, which just launched probably about 6 months ago. And I'm actually the executive sponsor of the women's network. So within a lot of these smaller groups within Condé Nast, these are actually some of those things that are happening. We'll do other events. There's smaller mentorship programs, not necessarily always talking about mental health, but I do think that feeling like there's a community of people within your own company is really helpful too, and being able to know people within other departments that you can talk to who are not necessarily your direct manager, they're not a colleague of yours, I think has been really helpful. But yes, I would love to have mental health services too.
Employee assistance program. It's a great idea. And so is all the other stuff you're doing. Thanks for the diversity space. I opened your magazine in the nail salon, and I saw someone that looked like me. So for folks that are older and younger, but they see hues that are like them, they get some trust as they know that you understand, that you get us and you value us as beautiful persons.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. We have one more time, time for only one more question. Yes.
Thank you both for being here. A lot of people in their 20s and 30s spend time trying to build an identity as they enter into the workforce, especially in industries where they're not fully represented all the time. And they reconcile how to fit in while also trying to be true to who they are. And so I'm curious to hear from your perspective, how did you build your identity and grow into that confidence of being who you are?
Yeah, like I said, it was not always there. I think that my personality is actually pretty reserved. I was definitely someone when I was a junior editor who I got very nervous, I think, pitching ideas in meetings and stuff. At a certain point though, like even something like this, like people always talk about public speaking. I had the hardest time public speaking. Like in college, I had a terrible phobia of it. And it's just something that you end up having to work through. I think for me though, coming up with my own identity within the workspace, it was just finding that confidence in myself that like if I had ideas and they were sort of a bit weird and outside the box, that it was okay. I actually also weirdly think that social media has helped me with that because having a persona on social media, like it actually helps me in my daily job once you become a manager, you're not always a creator anymore. And I think that I missed something about the act of creating all the time. So now it's not even part of my job, but now I'll do videos or I'll do other content that's just for my own Instagram. And I feel like it's helping to serve not only like that creative hunger that I'm having, but I also do feel like it's helping to define my identity within the workspace, but also within the beauty industry as a whole. Like when I was talking before about like how we're different from influencers. Someone asked me in another panel, would you call yourself an influencer? I was like, oh no, I'm not an influencer. But they were like, you actually are. I think it's just that the word influencer has gotten a strange connotation. But I do actually think I'm an influencer in that certain things I do or products that I talk about or getting my brows microbladed, I instantly have people messaging me saying, oh, because you wrote about that, I'm actually gonna try that now. So I think that it's helped me weirdly as I've been working out what to post on social media and what I want the world to know about me. It's actually helped me define who I am too.
That's actually how I found Michelle. I was admiring her from afar on Instagram, and I slid into her DMs and was like, hey, Michelle, would you like to come talk at Google?
I was like,
You're an influencer. You're an influencer for sure. Well, there's copies of the magazine in the very back for all those who may want to grab one on their way out. Thank you so much, Michelle, for being here today.